Hi, this is Dr. Grover, and instead of a reading this time, I thought I'd make a little screencast to show you some of the things that I think about the job search. So I've titled this presentation, The Job Search, Three Mistakes Everyone Makes. First mistake people make when they're applying for a job is they don't actually understand their employer's needs. We've talked in class about the golden rule, about how writing is a service to the reader, or alternatively, the rhetorical situation, how you have to think about the speaker, the message, and the audience, and the conditions of success created by that situation. In either case, the key thing is the audience or the reader trying to figure out what they need and giving it to them so that you can get the response that you want from your writing. In this case, it's a job application, and you want the audience to give you a chance at the job. So why do we make this mistake? There's actually a lot of reasons for this, and they don't all have to do with you, the writer of a resume. One is that you have never been on the other side, probably. You aren't a boss that has hired a bunch of people, or if you have, you probably haven't hired people in the field that you're applying to. And so it's naturally hard to understand what that person needs if you've never been on the other side of the table. Another thing is that job ads tend to be really poorly written. They use a lot of stock phrases and hollow content. You'll see something like 2 years experience required on all kinds of job ads that are really meant for recent college graduates who wouldn't have 2 years of experience. But when they write job ads, they just kind of recycle old language, or they just put what they think they want, and they don't often think about it as much as they ought to. Secondly, they often talk around what they actually need. I've highlighted here in this old job ad. There's lots of places where this job ad is talking about writing skills, but it never really says it. It talks around it over and over. And so you really have to read between the lines to understand what they're getting at. Also, as I said before, they recycle old language. This one isn't as old as it makes it sound. It says minimum of basic knowledge of Macintosh computers, internet, and desktop publishing programs. As you know, no one calls them Macintosh computers anymore. A Mac has been the way we've referred to it for at least 20 years. Also, we don't call anything desktop publishing programs anymore. Microsoft Word is technically desktop publishing, but we just call it a word processor. This kind of old language gets recycled over and over every year as they hire new, in this case, copywriters. They don't often update the language, and that makes it hard for you to understand what they want because you're hearing what they wanted years and years ago. Lastly, job ads are often written by committee, not only one person. If you're trying to get hired at a large corporation or a very complex team is looking for a new person, there might be 3 or 4 or 5 people who all contributed to the job ad, which makes it kind of bloated. Everybody added something and nobody went through and combined like things and cut out redundancy, and that can make it pretty hard to understand what they're looking for because there's just so much on the page. There's actually one more, and that's that in modern businesses, especially larger corporations, the person who's doing the actual hiring, for example, the manager of a team who's looking for a new copywriter, he or she doesn't do the hiring directly. That hiring information, like the job ad, gets sent to HR, human resources, who might add their own spin on things because they're experts in human resources and hiring processes. And then human resources is the one who do the initial looking at candidates and screening them before they send that information back, the number of applicants they think are good, to the manager or the team who's actually going to do the hiring. So it's a little like the telephone game where what the original person who's going to do the hiring wanted might have been filtered through multiple people and then through HR and then back again, which can be quite tricky. This results in overwhelmed applicants. If you're applying to a multitude of jobs, it can be really hard to understand what the employer needs times the number of jobs that you're applying for. Last year, I applied for 50 jobs, which meant that to do a good job, I had to understand what my employer wanted for 50 different potential employers. And what a lot of people do is they end up using the exact same materials for every application. They'll write a standard vague cover letter, and they'll make one resume, and they'll send it to every single position that's open. And we can see that actually. This cover letter, this sample one, uses really vague language. It's not particularly suited to any one employer or any one position. It's trying to just be good enough for anything, and that doesn't tend to work very well. Also, this one, you can see that it's using one font for the standard cover letter, and then suddenly it drops in a different font for the name of the potential employer, and that's a real red flag. That's a real indication that you're throwing this letter out at everybody and just changing the name of the employer in each case. I want you to think about it like the difference between if you're trying to sell clothes. Walmart can stock 800 of the same size shirt, and that shirt doesn't have to fit any single person, because they know that over the course of weeks, hundreds of thousands of people are going to come into a Walmart and look at and try on that shirt, and it's going to fit some of them. Right? Walmart's going to sell the shirt because eventually, just in a numbers game, somebody's going to try on that shirt and it's going to magically fit their body. And if the other 800 people who tried it on, it didn't fit their body and they didn't buy it, that's no big deal because Walmart is huge. That's the kind of approach a lot of people are taking. It's not, I'm going to tailor my resume to the particular job. I'm going to imagine what my employer needs and I'm going to try and write that and make a strong rhetorical situation. It's, I'm just going to make one t-shirt and I'm going to send it to enough jobs that one of them is going to hopefully want to hire me. Contrast that to being a tailor or getting a bespoke suit. If you're a tailor and you want to make sure somebody buys what you're selling, you build that thing exactly for that client. And that's really what you need to be effective on the job search. It's much better to write one resume and cover letter that are tailored to the job at hand, tailored to what the employer really wants, than to send out 50 or 100 applications that are all the same and just hope it fits one of the employers. So what is the solution? I've already been talking about it. We have to analyze our job ads better. We have to be very careful of going through and reading between the lines and trying to understand things from the employer's perspective so that we can tailor our job ads to them. Another approach is it's really better to work with a master resume. That is kind of a blueprint of all possible resumes. It doesn't matter how long your master resume is. It can include all the things at any length that you might include. And then for any individual job, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, write a resume from scratch, but you can pull different aspects of that master resume and then tweak them to make different resumes that are good enough and tailored to each individual job. And that's something we're going to look at in the next couple of weeks. We're going to analyze job ads, you're going to compose a master resume, and then you're going to tailor it to a specific job. And that's a much better approach. Okay, mistake 2 is that we often send the wrong message. We just talked about the rhetorical situation, how we have to understand who the audience is, but we also have to understand what the message is supposed to be. And I'm going to talk about this through an analogy. Now imagine for a second that you go on a first date, and that for whatever reason you think that the point of the first date is to get married. If that's the case, you're going to have a bunch of awkward first dates because instead of asking normal first date questions, you're going to be saying things like, what do you think we should name our kids and how many should we have? And I have a ring here. Would you like to get engaged? People don't usually respond well on a first date to somebody who's jumping the gun and skipping straight to marriage. They don't want to commit to that much of a future for somebody they barely know. And this is a mistake that people often make in dating. Free dating advice for you, but also in applying for jobs. When you're on a first date, the point is not to get married, to find a mate. The point is to get a second date. And the questions that you ask and the things that you say, the place you pick to go, all that stuff, it needs to be focused on getting a second date, or in dating, finding out if you want a second date yourself, not marriage. If you do that, then you'll have some good first dates because they will be, not too intense. You won't ask weird questions and things like that. So here's the thing. Your application, your cover letter, and your resume, that's your first date with your employer. And if you treat that like the point of those two documents is to get you hired, that's like showing up on a first date with a ring. It's going to scare people away. You're going to cram too much into that first date, and the stakes are going to be so high that you're going to set off a lot of people's red flags. That you're not really the type of person they want to be around or long-term that they want to hire. But if instead you treat the application, your resume and your cover letter, that their purpose is to get a second date or to get an interview, and the interview or a series of interviews, that's where somebody will make a decision about getting married, getting hired, then your application will work much better. So think about your cover letter and your resume. The point of them, the message, the purpose is to get an interview. It's like a dating profile. You want to show yourself as being unique. You're not just like every other person on Match.com or wherever it is, but you're not too quirky. You're not too crazy. You don't want to come on too strong from the very beginning. Secondly, you want to show that you're qualified, but you don't need to say everything at once. You don't want to come off as overqualified or overeager about it. You can scale back a little bit, knowing that The resume and the cover letter don't have to say every single thing about you. They're just an opening so that through an interview or an interview process, you can say a lot more things about you. And you want to definitely avoid red flags. You don't want to reveal anything in these early documents that might be considered a red flag. Those things might come up when somebody knows more context about you. You could bring up something about your work history in an interview that won't read like a red flag because they understand the larger context. But if you say something in a cover letter like, oh, I got fired from my last job, but it's a long story, that's not going to work there where it would work when you have more of a relationship. Another thing to think about is you do it like a chef. Everything you put in your cover letter and your resume is like food you're putting on the table for that person to eat. But the thing is that your potential employer reading your materials, they can only eat so much before they're sated, before they're full. You don't want to fill up your reader on bread before you've gotten to the fajitas or the lasagna or the roasted vegetables or the huli chicken. I'm getting a little hungry here. We better move on. You want to pare back your cover letter and your resume's content to have the best stuff and leave out the stuff that's just bread, just water, the stuff that'll fill them up and not really impress them at all. And knowing that you don't have to put everything in from the first second because you are going to have an interview after this, before you get to the hiring, that really relieves the pressure that you have to cram everything in. Okay, mistake number 3, and this is a huge one, is making claims without evidence. Now here's the thing. Anybody can put anything on a resume or in a cover letter. You can claim anything you want, and no one can say that you don't have it. There's no police out there that police resumes before they get sent in. Now, of course, you could get caught in a lie if you say that you know how to program in C++, or if you know how to do complex calculus equations or something, and they might find out later that you don't actually know that. Or if you claim to have graduated from a certain university, you went to Harvard and you got a degree, and later on they could find out that that's untrue. Now that's a problem. Lying is a problem of its own. But for little things, no one can tell. So if you make a claim about who you are and you don't supply evidence, nobody really is going to believe you. You got to remember that these employers that you might be trying to get to hire you, they've seen hundreds of applications. They've seen hundreds of people claim that they have certain skills, soft skills or hard skills, but that they didn't, in reality, they didn't actually have them. So you got to focus on the effects of the things you have, not the causes. Here is a weak resume section. You might have a section on your resume that says skills. I can do research. I'm a problem solver. I have a positive attitude. I'm trustworthy. Those are claims, but they are not. They have no evidence. Why should I believe that you're trustworthy? Why would I believe that you're a good problem solver? Literally anybody can write that on their resume. If you focus less on the things you say you have and more on evidence that shows it, what happened because you were trustworthy or because you kept a positive attitude, that's much stronger. So here, in these are some paragraphs about some jobs that this person had on their resume. And the first one, they showed that they were soon asked to represent the library and aid patrons at an information kiosk located right next to the entrance. That's an effect of who this person is. It shows that they are trustworthy or that they relate well to other people, that they communicate well, that they have a cheery disposition. They don't have to tell the employer that they have that. They've shown that they've had it. They've given evidence, not just a random claim. And at the bottom, they show that they were asked to fill in at other bank branches. An employer doesn't ask somebody to do that unless they know they're trustworthy, especially at a bank where you're dealing with money and trustworthiness is a major thing. Saying you're trustworthy is not as strong as showing that because you were trustworthy, you were entrusted with certain responsibilities. Another approach is that stories speak louder than words. It's one thing to say you are trustworthy. It's another to show the effect of that in your resume, but your cover letter is where you can really sell that, because in your cover letter you have room to tell stories that back things up. Here, the same person who wrote the resume we were looking at is discussing in a cover letter that, a little more of the context behind some of the things that happen. She claims, if we go back, that she has research skills here, but she shows in a story in this in the last highlighted thing how she used research in her own writing and in school and some of the things she's interested in. That is so much stronger than just saying she's a good researcher. Okay, so these are the 3 mistakes everyone makes. People fail to understand what their employer actually wants or needs. They send the wrong message, focusing on getting hired rather than on getting an interview. And they make claims without evidence. They drop words in there, but they don't provide any proof that they are actually the things that they claim to be. We're going to work on avoiding these 3 mistakes over the next couple of weeks, and I think your materials will be much stronger for it. Thanks for paying attention. Make sure you bring your questions to class, and I hope to see you again soon.